The tale of affection between my younger brother and me during our summer break, a genuine sibling love story. I'm Kate. I am 20 years old. This occurred just this summer when I returned home for vacation from university. It was one of those impulsive notions. I contemplated. Why not give my parents a delightful surprise? I kept my arrival a secret from them. This heightened my excitement even further. As I pulled my suitcase along the well-known streets of my quaint hometown, I was eager to witness their responses. As I swung open the front door, anticipating warm embraces and surprised expressions from my parents, I discovered tranquility. It appeared they had not returned home yet. I was on the verge of disappointment when a familiar voice suddenly called out my name. It was Joe. My younger sibling has just celebrated his 18th birthday. He had reached the age of 18 now. A little taller than I am, with a wide grin that has the power to illuminate any space. Joe, I declared. As we embraced, I let my bags fall to the ground. It was one of those effortless moments. Authentic salutations. Yet, I found myself unable to overlook how mature he appeared. Upon Joe's departure, I shut the door behind me and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. The silence in the house was profound, and the understanding that I was genuinely where I belonged began to settle in. Following an extensive journey home from university, navigating through packed buses and bustling train stations, I had to rid myself of the fatigue. I made the choice to go directly to the shower. The warm water cascaded over my skin, erasing the residue of journeying. And for the first time in weeks, I began to feel a sense of calm wash over me. The semester had been challenging, filled with assignments, due dates, and the relentless pace of life at university. However, at this moment, positioned beneath the cascade of water, I allowed my shoulders to relax and finally released a breath. Post-shower, I slipped into a breezy summer dress. It was gentle and delicate, the type of ensemble you don when you're keeping it effortlessly casual, perfectly cozy for relaxation. I quietly made my way to my room, my feet softly touching the ground. As I pushed open the door, the familiar warmth enveloped me like a comforting embrace. My previous posters remained affixed to the walls. The bed remains adorned with my cherished patterned sheets. It felt as though I was returning to a different iteration of who I am. Yet, another force had been pulling, lingering in my thoughts. I had been so occupied with my studies, and so dedicated to my job that I hadn't truly experienced much of a personal life. The closeness I once overlooked had been absent for some time now. Well, you see. Absolutely. There had been occasions scattered throughout. However, nothing of great significance. Nothing genuine. It wasn't as if there were numerous chances to relax in a communal dorm with limited space, barriers and inquisitive housemates. As I collapsed onto my bed, the idea lingered in my mind. It wasn't merely about the necessity of another person, it was about rediscovering a connection to my own self once more, in harmony with my own desires. I reached for my phone, wandering through the feed without a clear direction at first. However, it didn't take long for my thoughts to drift away. Reclining, propped up against the pillows, I allowed my fingertips to lightly touch my skin. It was automatic. It's primarily about re-entering, above all else. My hands glided across my arms, my collarbone, the gentle texture of my garment. I released a trembling sigh, simply allowing myself to experience emotions, re-establish a connection, and relax after all that I had been navigating. I was lost in my thoughts when a knock on my door broke the silence. My heart leaped into my throat. I nearly tossed my phone aside. Kate. Joe's voice echoed from the other side. I swiftly repositioned myself. As I adjusted my dress, I called out for him to enter. Joe began the door, pausing briefly before crossing the threshold. It was evident that something weighed on his mind. His expression lacked the usual carefree quality. He lingered in an uncomfortable silence for a moment before ultimately approaching the boundary of my bed. He settled into his seat, running a hand through his hair. I was uncertain about his desires. However, I concluded that it must have been significant for him to stop by. Joe settled at the edge of my bed. It was immediately clear to me that he was burdened by something. Initially, he remained silent, merely adjusted in discomfort. He appeared to be contemplating how to begin. I remained silent, allowing him the freedom to navigate whatever thoughts were occupying his mind. At last, he began to speak. His words emerged with a hesitant rhythm at the beginning. But then the narrative flowed forth. He shared thoughts about his girlfriend, a relationship that I was aware he had been in for some time, based on what I had heard previously. I had always believed they were content as a couple. A vibrant and exhilarating connection, filled with joy and adventure, where every moment is a delightful experience. However, it appears that all was not as flawless as it appeared. He shared with me the details of their recent conflicts, regarding both minor details and significant matters. He sensed that regardless of his actions, it failed to bring her any joy. She would become frustrated with him about issues he wasn't even aware were. The arguments consistently left him feeling utterly exhausted. He confessed that he had feelings for her, yet he was uncertain about whether he could continue down this path. The relationship began to weigh heavily on him, transforming into a source of strain rather than a source of happiness. While he spoke, I couldn't help but observe the significant transformation he had undergone since the last occasion I truly spent time with him. He had changed from the boy I once teased or looked after. There was a serene wisdom that surrounded him now. This depth that I had never encountered before. It struck me suddenly that he had matured. And not merely in a physical sense. That was difficult to overlook as well. His shoulders had a more pronounced width. His features were more pronounced. He conducted himself in a distinct manner, with a newfound assurance that had previously been absent. I paid attention while he continued to speak. My thoughts were divided. One part focused on his words while the other was consumed by this newfound understanding of him. He possessed an undeniable allure at this moment. Something that captivated the gaze. It felt unusual, nearly disquieting, to perceive him in this fresh perspective. He persisted, revealing himself in ways I had never witnessed before. He expressed the fatigue of constantly feeling like he was the only one making an effort, attempting to mend the issues in his relationship. Forever the one saying sorry, even when he believed he hadn't committed any wrongdoing. He confessed that he had considered ending the relationship with her. Yet, he found himself questioning whether he possessed the necessary resolve. I wished to offer him solace, to express a sentiment that would uplift his spirits. Yet it felt as though words fell short. I followed my instincts. I drew closer and enveloped him in my embrace. It wasn't the sort of embrace you offer out of courtesy or routine, it was genuine. A silent expression of understanding. I was present for him. As we lingered in that moment, my embrace envelopes him. A change stirred in the atmosphere. I can't tell if it was the way he settled into my space, or the comforting warmth he brought with him. Yet, in an instant, my senses sharpened, and he became the center of my attention. The gentle caress of his hair as it brushed against my cheek. Of the subtle aroma of his cologne. The gradual easing of his breath as he found his calm. Without much contemplation, my hand glided to his hair, gently sweeping it back. It felt gentle beneath my touch, As I sat there, my fingers instinctively followed the contour of his jaw. Then down to his neck. It was a simple act of kindness. Yet, it felt electrifying. I sensed him unwind further beneath my touch, gently inclining towards it. Thoughts were swirling in my head, caught in a conflict between my current actions and the path I ought to take. I found myself questioning the reason for my persistence. Why I didn't hold back. Perhaps it was how he instilled a sense of stability in me. Perhaps it was merely the feelings of the moment. Whatever it may have been, I was unable to cease. I can't even recall making the choice to go through with it. However, at a certain moment, I grasped his hand gently and set it upon my leg. It was spontaneous. The sort of action you take before you allow doubt to creep in. I sensed him stiffen for a brief instant, clearly taken by surprise. Yet, his hands found their place exactly where I had positioned them. I sensed his uncertainty. Yet, there's also the intrigue. His hand radiated warmth. His touch was hesitant at first. It was as if he were caught in a moment of indecision, unsure whether to take a step forward or remain in place. Gradually, he started to let his fingers glide in gentle circles along my thigh, ascending steadily with every pass. My heart raced within me, and I could sense the warmth enveloping my skin. I found myself uncertain about the direction this was taking. Yet, I found it impossible to put an end to it. Every fiber of my being was on high alert, reacting to his touch in a manner that I hadn't experienced in ages. We lingered in that moment, as if time had stretched into eternity. His hand glided softly, delving into the unknown. As I leaned closer to him, my face nestled in the curve of his neck. My body appeared to possess a will of its own, moving and bending beneath his caress, responding to each action he took. And then, just as the moment seemed to reach its peak of intensity, the creak of the front door swinging open broke the stillness. I recoiled with such speed it felt as if I had been scorched. With a swift motion, I distanced myself from him, quickly adjusting my dress. My heart continued to race, but now it was born from panic. Joe appeared equally as flustered as I was. His face flushed as he hurriedly retreated, creating a bit of space between us. I hardly had a moment to regain my composure before my parents shouted out. Their voices echoed throughout the home. They appeared to be filled with enthusiasm, anxious, and felt a wave of relief wash over me all at once. I compelled myself to rise and go welcome them. My thoughts are still whirling from the recent events. They embraced me warmly, inundated with a barrage of inquiries regarding my failure to give prior notice of my arrival. I whispered a few words about wanting to catch them off guard, striving to maintain a sense of normalcy. As we settled in for dinner, sharing laughter and reconnecting, my thoughts continually wandered back to that moment in my room. The sensation of Joe's touch lingered in my mind, refusing to fade away. The manner in which my body had reacted. I found myself pondering whether he was contemplating it as well. The remainder of that evening unfolded in a haze. I engaged in the act of conversing, chuckling, and reconnecting with my parents. Yet my thoughts wandered far beyond the present moment. My mind kept returning to the events that unfolded with Joe. The memory lingered, the warmth of his hand etched in my mind. The manner in which my body had responded. The energy crackling in the atmosphere surrounding us. Everything felt so new, so striking. I couldn't get rid of it, regardless of my efforts to concentrate on other matters. Even after I retired for the night, I was unable to find rest. I writhed and shifted restlessly. My mind is a flurry of ideas, revisiting every detail repeatedly. The way he gazed at me just before we separated. The gentle caress of his hand. The sensation of being so near to him. It was overwhelming to take in. I found myself pondering his thoughts. It was uncertain if he felt as unsettled by it as I did. The following day proved to be even more challenging. Observing Joe as he moves about the house. A peculiar tension hung in the air between us. It wasn't precisely uncomfortable. However, it was distinct. It was as if we both understood the situation, yet neither of us knew how to address it. We were uncertain about how to behave in each other's presence now. I found myself sneaking looks at him. Observing subtle details I hadn't noticed previously, like the way his jawline tightened when he was lost in contemplation. The manner in which his hair cascaded over his forehead. The manner in which he glided. Each moment we encountered one another. My heart raced slightly. And I found myself contemplating every engagement. Did he catch the way I gazed at him? Did he experience the same attraction that I felt? Or was he merely attempting to erase it from his memory? Attempting to carry on as if nothing occurred? I attempted to divert my attention. Yet, nothing appeared to be effective. My parents occupied themselves with their own pursuits for the majority of the day. It's providing me with an abundance of time for contemplation. I found myself repeatedly revisiting that moment in my room. Envisioning all the paths it might have taken instead. What if the door had remained closed when it finally swung open? What if we had kept going? The inquiries seemed to stretch on indefinitely. And they only intensified my restlessness. That twilight. My father entered the living room where I was seated. Wandering through my phone, lost in a sea of content. He expressed his regrets. He and my mom had to step out for the night to handle some matters. He experienced a sense of regret concerning my solitude, particularly since I had just returned. However, I dismissed it, informing him that everything was okay. Once they departed, the silence in the house was unsettling. It was only Joe and me. And the quiet appeared to magnify each subtle sound. I attempted to concentrate on something, immersing myself in reading. Engrossed in the screen. Yet my mind wandered elsewhere. The silence of the home only intensified the feeling, allowing my thoughts to drift back to the sensation of his hand resting on my leg. The emotions I experienced when we were so near. I can't recall when the notion first took shape in my mind. Yet, when it finally appeared, it was utterly undeniable. I attempted to reason my way out of it. I attempted to engage in a dialogue with my own thoughts. Yet, the attraction was overwhelming. The recollection of yesterday lingered vividly. Excessively bright. The allure of what might unfold if I allowed myself to continue this time was simply irresistible. It was late when I finally reached a decision. The dwelling lay shrouded in darkness, enveloped in a profound silence. I could perceive the subtle sound of Joe's breathing filtering through the delicate walls. My heart raced with anticipation as I approached his room. My bare feet glided silently over the hardwood floor. As I swung the door open, I observed him reclined on his side. His back was turned to me. He appeared serene. His breathing was slow and steady in the gentle glow of the night light. For a brief instant, I simply remained in place, observing him, contemplating whether I would truly follow through with this. However, I soon realized that I was in motion. My feet moved me toward his bed before I could reason my way out of it. I nestled in beside him. Be cautious not to disturb him initially. The bed shifted beneath me, and I could sense the warmth of his body beside mine. Initially, I simply remained there, attuning to the rhythm of his breath, sensing the ebb and flow of his breathing. However, the more time I spent there, the quicker my own breathing became. I felt compelled to reach out. My hand brushed against his arm softly, exploring the possibilities. It didn't take long before he began to move. His breathing shifted as he began to awaken. He turned over onto his back, blinking in confusion as he came to the realization of my presence. His expression revealed a clear sense of surprise. The way his eyes grew larger as he absorbed the scene before him. I didn't allow him the opportunity to inquire or object. I extended my hand towards him, leading it toward my leg, the manner in which I experienced the day prior. He paused for a brief moment. His muscles tightened beneath my fingertips. However, he then eased into a state of calm, allowing me to take the reins. The ensuing moments passed in a haze. My senses sharpened to the world around me, the warmth of his hand, the manner in which his fingers danced cautiously at the beginning. Then, with increasing assurance as he settled in, my heart raced with anticipation. My skin is tingling. In that instant, I was utterly adrift. A weakness existed within it, a rawness that rendered everything profoundly authentic. It lacked perfection and polish. However, that was of no consequence. The connection was what truly mattered. The manner in which we appeared to grasp one another without the need for spoken language. The manner in which our bodies flowed in this silent harmony. Although the circumstances were entirely unfamiliar, it felt inherently organic. It was an experience that resonated deeply, in a manner beyond my ability to articulate. It felt as though we had stepped over an unseen boundary. And there was no turning back now. Without a moment's hesitation, I leaned in closer to him. Bridging the distance that separated us unfolded in what seemed like a gradual dance, though it was likely only a fleeting moment. My hand gently rested on his shoulder. And before he had the chance to speak or act, I drew closer and pressed my lips against his. It was not uncertain or wavering, it was daring, brimming with the tension that had been simmering between us. I nudged him softly yet assertively back onto the couch. My hands rested gently on his shoulders, leading him down until he found himself lying there beneath me. I sensed the change in his body as he settled into the cushions. His hands naturally settled on my waist. I ascended onto him, positioned atop his hips, and the sensation of presence over him, with every inch of our bodies so near, was nearly mesmerizing. The kiss grew more intense, transforming into a state that is more measured and intentional. I sensed his grip subtly firming around my waist. It was evident that he was making an effort to find his footing. The intensity of the moment felt almost overwhelming. My hands glided up to his face. As my thumbs grazed the stubble along his jawline, I framed the moment perfectly. His skin radiated warmth. The feel of his stubble beneath my fingertips sent a delightful flutter through my stomach. I inclined my head, shifting the tilt of our embrace. And his lips parted just a bit. That subtle movement sent a chill coursing through me. And I leaned into him more. Allow my body to lean into his, feeling the weight of our connection. I was completely assuming control. Establishing the rhythm. Mastering the tempo. It was incredibly satisfying to embrace that sense of empowerment. That mastery. There was an astonishing closeness in being atop him. Feeling his heartbeat against me. His hands holding me as if he feared I might slip away. Our breaths grew more labored, submerging in the rhythm of our whispers. Occasionally, I would draw back slightly to observe him. His eyes were partially closed. His lips were a bit swollen from the kiss. His chest heaved and fell, as if he were struggling to draw in air. It was among the most exquisite sights I had ever witnessed. And the way he gazed at me during those fleeting moments of silence. It felt as if I were the sole focus of existence in that instant. Made my heart feel as if it were on the verge of exploding. I bent down once more, gently placing my lips against his jawline, his cheek, the edge of his lips, before rediscovering his lips once more. Every kiss held its own uniqueness. Some swift and playful banter. Some are gradual and prolonged. It felt as though we were relishing the bond. His hand began to wander slightly, gliding up my back and then cascading down to my thighs. Yet, it wasn't hurried or aggressive, it felt as though he was allowing me to take the lead, relying on me to establish the mood. That only intensified my desire for him. Being in control of him felt so instinctive. This was precisely the place I was meant to be. I adored how his body responded to mine. The way he shifted gently beneath me, as if he were seeking to bridge the gap, despite the closeness we already shared. I experienced a profound sense of strength intertwined with a delicate vulnerability, and it was truly remarkable. I felt entirely in command yet fully receptive to him. If only he understood the depth of my desire for it. How long I had contemplated being with him, keeping him beneath me, and finally allowing everything that had been brewing between us to come to a close. The manner in which his hands clasped my waist. The manner in which he gazed at me. Utterly unraveled. It intensified my desire for him. It wasn't merely the tension or the attraction, it was the depth of my longing to be that close to him, surpassing every tiny limit that once restrained us. Indeed, as the warmth began to rise, reality struck us with the force of a brick wall. As I bent closer and pressed my lips to his once more, my thoughts surged forward. This was it, this was the moment. I sought to delve deeper, to move beyond kissing and touching. My body was practically vibrating with longing, and his was reacting to every slight shift I made. I sensed it, I sensed him. In that moment, I took a brief pause and softly inquired, yet intentionally, "Do you possess anything?" The expression on his face, as a man. Initially, it was a blend of bewilderment. It seemed he didn't fully grasp what I was trying to convey, accompanied by the emergence of light. Epiphany. Then he offered me a rather bashful grin. His cheeks flushed a delicate hue of crimson. Negative. I do not. I failed to consider. I was unaware. I was utterly astonished. 18 years of age. Has a partner. And there were no condoms in his room. I simply gazed at him for a moment, partially in disbelief, half in frustration. Indeed. Let's go. How can you possibly have nothing? I released a laugh tinged with frustration, shaking my head. He made an effort to justify his actions, expressing surprise at the unexpected turn of events. This evening, it had an endearing quality that was utterly irritating. Honestly, Joe, I stated, still chuckling, though mainly to keep the atmosphere alive. What kind of boyfriend doesn't have protection readily available? He merely shrugged, appearing completely vulnerable. Yet somewhat. I sincerely regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred. I suppose I'm not as ready as I believed, he remarked. His voice was soft and filled with apprehension. I let out a deep breath. My head rested against his chest for a brief moment as I contemplated my next move. It was a thing. I was reluctant to bring it to an end. I was unable to cease. I desired him far too intensely. And the notion of simply allowing things to remain unresolved like this wasn't a possibility for me. Thus, I chose to change direction. Approach the situation from a new perspective. If he wasn't prepared, all right. I would ensure that this night remained etched in his memory forever. I glided down a bit. My body glided against his as I shifted from his hips to his thighs. The way his breath caught as I shifted slightly ignited a flicker of confidence within me. Those hands of his, that had been resting on my waist, shifted a bit, uncertain about my next steps after this situation, transforming the landscape. I gazed up at him while I nestled between his legs. My hands glided softly against his knees, gradually moving up the sides of his thighs. His whole body tightened. It seemed as though he was preparing himself for whatever lay ahead. Once more, his breath hitched, and I sensed his struggle to maintain composure. Yet, his body was turning against him. Each subtle nuance, each subtle movement I made elicited a response from him, in manners he likely wasn't even aware of. His fingers sank into the softness of the couch cushions. His thighs tensed gently beneath my touch. And the chest rose and fell with these deep, irregular breaths. A smile crept onto my face as I kissed him once more. Reduce this duration. He could sense the tension in his body escalating with each movement I made. His physique was incredibly attuned. And I absolutely adored it. I relished the thought of being able to do this to him. That I could elicit these responses from him simply by being near. Simply by making contact with him in the right manner. I smiled at that. Gently placing another kiss on his stomach, I allowed my hands to explore a bit more. His skin radiated heat beneath my fingers. Every slight movement I made appeared to send another shiver coursing through him. It was captivating. Observing him unravel in this manner. Realizing I was the driving force behind it all. As I continued on my path, I sensed him easing into a state of calmness, little by little. His body sank into the couch, releasing all the tension and hesitation he had been holding onto. Clinging tightly, he began to accompany me. Initially, with a gentle touch. His hips moved with a subtle shift. His hands finally found their way back to me, resting on my shoulders as if he required something to grasp. The rhythm of his breath. The soft, subtle sounds he uttered quietly to himself. It only ignited my passion even more. I appreciated his sensitivity. It was as if every small action I took only intensified his response. His body was almost communicating with me, leading me through this quiet, intuitive approach. And the divine. I found it enjoyable. I found it to be even more enjoyable than I had anticipated. Realizing he was relishing the moment. He was entirely at my mercy. Enhanced the entire experience. At a certain moment, he released a soft sound. Nearly silent moan. And it sent a surge of warmth coursing through me. I took a moment to pause. Merely to gaze upon him once more. His head was tilted back. His lips were gently parted. His eyes fluttered shut as he surrendered to the embrace of the moment. He appeared absolutely stunning. Utterly exposed and unraveling. It only fueled my desire to continue. When it had all come to an end, I experienced an unusual blend of feelings. The thrill of the moment had faded away. Yet the excitement in my chest remained palpable. I gradually rose from the couch, experiencing the heaviness of the circumstances settle in. I was at a loss for thoughts. Truly, a part of me remained entangled in the intensity of it all. How vibrant everything felt in that moment. It felt as though I had been adrift in a bubble where nothing else held significance. Where all things seamlessly fell into place. However, at this moment, remaining still in the silence, I found myself questioning everything. I cast a fleeting look in his direction. Remaining sprawled out on the couch. His chest rose and fell gently as he struggled to regain his breath. His eyes were shut tight. Yet he appeared serene. Material. He bore the expression of someone who had just undergone an overwhelming experience. A shift that altered the atmosphere surrounding us. His body remained alive with energy. I was able to discern. As if he were still hovering in the air, not fully grounded. I held on to him tightly.